chosen one. Pause for a moment and listen with your heart. This message is not for everyone. It is for the soul that has been tested beyond explanation, for the believer who stood alone when the world turned cold, for the servant of Allah who was pushed to the edge yet refused to let go of faith. What you are about to hear is not exaggeration, nor arrogance, nor fantasy. It is a reminder of what happens when a servant chooses Allah at a moment where most people would choose despair. Shaitan does not kneel to power, wealth, or status. He kneels when a believer remains obedient under unbearable pressure, when faith survives betrayal, delay, and injustice, and when a heart bows only to Allah, no matter how intense the storm becomes. This is the story of a faith that shook the unseen, a patience that silenced the whispers, and a journey that proves Allah never abandons those who cling to Him sincerely. If you have survived something that should have broken you, if your iman grew stronger where others walked away, then this message is for you. Chosen one, what makes your story powerful is not that you were never tempted, but that you were tempted deeply and still chose Allah, because there were moments when disobedience would have felt logical, justified, even necessary for survival, moments when sin looked like relief, when revenge looked like justice, when giving up looked like peace. Yet in those very moments when no one was watching, when the pressure was unbearable, when your heart was exhausted, you remembered Allah. And this is where Shaitan lost all leverage over you, because he relies on desperation to make people forget their Lord, and you did the opposite. You feared Allah more than your pain, you valued His pleasure over temporary comfort, and you chose obedience, even when it cost you ease, relationships, reputation, and time, proving that your iman was not conditional on convenience but rooted in conviction. And this level of obedience is rare, because it is easy to worship Allah when life is gentle, but it takes a chosen soul to worship Him while bleeding silently, to restrain the tongue when lies are spoken, to lower the gaze when desire is provoked, to remain honest when corruption offers shortcuts, to keep praying when dua seems unanswered. And Allah sees this struggle more clearly than anyone else, because the Quran reminds us that Allah knows what the hearts conceal. And your heart chose Him again and again in secret battles no one applauded, and this is why Shaitan was humiliated. Not because you were perfect, but because you were sincere, and sincerity in obedience strips Shaitan of his power, because he can only command those who obey him, while you stood firm and said through your actions, "My Lord is Allah." And every time you chose obedience over ease, Allah elevated you in ways you did not immediately see, storing honor for you in the unseen, strengthening your soul, refining your character, and preparing you for responsibilities that weak faith could never carry, because obedience under pressure is not just worship, it is proof that Allah truly reigns over your heart. Chosen one, understand this deeply. Not every test is designed to make you fall into sin. Some tests are far more dangerous, because they are designed to make you walk away from Allah altogether, to make you question His justice, doubt His wisdom, and slowly loosen your grip on faith until you let go without even realizing it. And this is where Shaitan invested his greatest effort, because if he could not corrupt your actions, he tried to corrupt your belief by surrounding you with unanswered dua, prolonged hardship, silent nights, betrayal from those you trusted, and outcomes that felt unfair, hoping you would say, "What is the point?" and abandon your prayers. But instead of leaving Allah, you ran back to Him wounded, confused, and exhausted, yet still believing, still bowing in sujood with tears soaking the ground, still calling upon Allah, even when your heart trembled with questions. And this is the kind of faith that angels witness in awe. Because Allah never promised a life without pain, but He promised that He is near to the broken-hearted, and while Shaitan whispered that Allah had forgotten you, your persistence proved otherwise, because you did not demand answers before obedience, you did not condition worship on comfort, and you did not allow hardship to rewrite your belief. And by staying when it would have been emotionally easier to leave, you transformed a test meant to destroy your iman into a ladder that elevated it. Because Allah values the servant who remains loyal in confusion more than the one who worships only when clarity exists. And every moment you chose to say, Allah knows best, instead of walking away, strengthened your soul, purified your intentions, and confirmed that your relationship with Allah was not transactional but rooted in surrender. And this is why Shaitan failed, because true faith is not proven when things make sense. It is proven when they don't, and you stayed. Chosen one. There were moments when the noise around you was intentional false accusations, twisted narratives, provocations, and relentless attempts to pull you into arguments that would drain your spirit and stain your character, because Shaitan knows that if he cannot destroy your faith directly, he will try to exhaust you emotionally and provoke you into reactions that compromise your dignity. Yet what defeated him was not your voice but your silence, a silence rooted in wisdom, trust in Allah, and self-control, because you understood that not every battle deserves a response, and not every lie needs correction when Allah is the ultimate witness. And while others spoke loudly to control the narrative, you restrained your tongue, guarded your intentions, and allowed truth to rise on its own time. And this restraint is not weakness, it is strength refined by faith. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that silence can be a form of protection, and your silence became an act of worship that denied Shaitan the chaos he feeds on, because he thrives on reaction, anger, and emotional outbursts. But you denied him all three, choosing instead to respond with patience, prayer, and distance, allowing those who accused you to expose themselves through inconsistency while you remained steady. And in doing so, Allah protected your honor in ways you could not orchestrate yourself. Because when a servant leaves their defense to Allah, Allah defends them with a precision no human strategy can match, and what was meant to provoke you into self-sabotage became the very means through which your character was elevated, your enemies were unsettled, and your inner strength was revealed, proving that silence guided by taqwa can dismantle the loudest enemy without a single word spoken. Chosen one of the greatest victories you achieved was not over people, circumstances, or visible enemies, but over the silent transformation that pain tries to force upon the soul, because there were moments when what hurt you deeply could have reshaped you into something bitter, cruel, cold, or unjust. Moments when betrayal could have justified disloyalty, oppression could have excused oppression in return, and heartbreak could have hardened your heart beyond repair. Yet you made a choice that very few make: you refuse to let suffering rewrite your character. And this is where your faith revealed its true depth. Because Shaitan does not always aim to destroy a believer immediately. Sometimes he aims to recreate himself through them, to turn the wounded into wounders, the oppressed into oppressors, and the betrayed into betrayers. But you broke that cycle by holding on to taqwa when anger begged to take control, by choosing restraint when retaliation felt deserved, and by remembering Allah when the ego demanded revenge, and this restraint was not weakness but moral strength, because the Quran praises those who restrain anger and pardon people, while Allah loves the doers of good. And you lived this verse in moments where forgiveness felt impossible and patience felt unbearable, yet you understood that becoming what hurt you would mean allowing Shaitan a delayed victory. So you protected your heart with remembrance, your actions with intention, and your soul with humility, refusing to sacrifice your akhlaq just to ease the pain. And although it cost you comfort, validation, and the satisfaction of reacting, Allah replaced that loss with inner peace, spiritual clarity, and a quiet strength that cannot be shaken, because character preserved under pressure becomes a source of light, and your refusal to let darkness reshape you turned your wounds into wisdom, your scars into guidance, and your experience into a living reminder that faith is not proven by how loudly one claims righteousness, but by how carefully one guards it when tested. And this is why your journey carries weight, because you did not merely survive hardship. You emerged from it without surrendering your values, proving that Allah was not only shaping your destiny, but refining your soul for a higher purpose, where integrity matters more than victory, and obedience matters more than emotional release. Chosen one, what makes your journey rare is not that you were spared hardship, but that hardship became the place where your faith was strengthened rather than destroyed, because there were long seasons where pressure did not come briefly but lingered relentlessly, where disappointment followed disappointment, where doors closed without explanation, where prayers felt delayed, where help from people faded, and where even those who once appeared strong in faith began to spiritually collapse, questioning Allah's wisdom, growing resentful, abandoning consistency in worship, or quietly distancing themselves from the path. Yet in those very conditions where faith usually weakens, yours deepened, not because you were immune to pain, but because you chose reliance over resentment, surrender over rebellion, and trust over accusation. And this choice reshaped your entire relationship with Allah, as you stopped expecting ease as proof of divine love, and began recognizing closeness to Allah as the greatest gift, regardless of circumstance. And while others measured faith by outcomes, you learned to measure it by obedience, sincerity, and perseverance, turning to Allah not only for solutions, but for strength to endure without losing your soul. And every hardship peeled away illusions, illusions of control, illusions of self-sufficiency, illusions of people saving you, until only Allah remained. And when Allah becomes all you have, you discover that He was always all you needed. And Shaitan did not anticipate this transformation, because his strategy depends on prolonged pressure, weakening belief. Yet pressure refined yours, making your dua more honest, your tears more sincere, your sujood more desperate, and your tawakkul more real, as you began speaking to Allah in the silence of the night with a heart stripped of pride, performance, and expectation. And this raw sincerity is powerful, because Allah responds to hearts that cling to Him when hope in everything else is gone. And although there were moments when exhaustion weighed heavily on your chest, when you felt spiritually drained, emotionally numb, and silently overwhelmed, you still prayed. Even when prayer felt heavy, you still remembered Allah. Even when remembrance felt dry, you still believed even when certainty trembled. And this persistence is not small in the sight of Allah, because faith that continues without emotional reward is faith purified of ego, and you never accused Allah of injustice. never turned your pain into disbelief, never allowed bitterness to harden your heart against your Lord, choosing instead to say, Allah knows what I do not, Allah sees what I cannot, and Allah's plan is better than my understanding. And this statement reflects a level of Iman that few reach, because it requires surrender without explanation, patience without timeline, and trust without visible guarantees. And through this process, Allah strengthened you internally long before elevating you externally, fortifying your heart, stabilizing your belief, sharpening your discernment, and anchoring your identity in faith rather than circumstance, so that when ease eventually approaches, it does not distract you from Allah. When recognition comes, it does not inflate your ego, and when success arrives, it does not corrupt your character, because your faith was forged in difficulty, and faith forged under collapse becomes unshakable, turning you into a living reminder that trials do not destroy true believers. They reveal them, refine them, and raise them to a station where reliance on Allah is no longer a concept, but a lived reality etched permanently into the soul. Chosen one, there were moments in your life when you believed you were standing alone, exposed, vulnerable, and unguarded. Moments when danger felt close, when harm seemed inevitable, when betrayals circled you, when plans were being made against you in silence, and when outcomes should have ended you emotionally, spiritually, or even physically. Yet what you did not see, what you could not calculate, was that Allah was intervening in ways beyond your perception, because divine protection does not always feel like safety, comfort, or immediate relief. Sometimes it feels like confusion, delay, redirection, loss, or even pain, yet behind each of those moments was a precise act of mercy, because Allah protects His sincere servants not only from what approaches them, but from what they themselves would have chosen had they known no better. And there were doors you desperately wanted that never opened, relationships you fought to keep that quietly fell apart, paths you planned that collapsed unexpectedly, and situations you thought were punishments that were actually shields, because Allah, in His perfect knowledge, was removing you from places where your faith would have weakened, your heart would have hardened, your character would have been compromised, or your soul would have been slowly destroyed. And Shaitan worked through people, timing, emotions, and false opportunities to corner you. Yet every time the trap was set, Allah altered the outcome without announcement, without spectacle, without explanation, because the Quran reminds us that Allah is the best of planners, and His planning does not require your awareness to be effective. And there were accidents that did not happen, words that were about to be spoken but were restrained, decisions you almost made but somehow didn't, people who intended harm but lost interest, chances that slipped away at the last second, and moments where something told you to pause, to turn back, to remain silent, or to walk away. And that something was not luck. It was divine protection operating quietly in your favor, because Allah places angels to guard His servants by His command, and this protection often works invisibly, redirecting outcomes rather than announcing miracles. And while Shaitan believed he was closing in on you, Allah was widening the distance between you and destruction, preserving you for a future you were not yet ready to understand. And there were nights you cried believing Allah was silent. Yet in that same silence, He was blocking what you never knew was coming, shielding your reputation, guarding your heart, and preventing wounds that would have taken years to heal, because not every mercy looks like provision. Some mercies look like prevention, And not every answered dubra comes in the form you expect. Some are answered by removing what would have harmed you later, and as time passed, you began to notice patterns, moments where looking back you realized, if that had happened, I would not be who I am today, or if that door had opened, my faith would not have survived. And this realization brings humility, because it reminds you that you were never sustaining yourself, protecting yourself, or navigating life alone. Allah was guiding every step, even when you felt lost, and this unseen protection is reserved for those who sincerely return to Allah, who seek Him in hardship, who repent when they fall, and who try again despite exhaustion, because Allah does not abandon a heart that keeps coming back to Him. And Shaitan hates this most, because it means no matter how complex his plot, divine protection dismantles it effortlessly. And while others may look at your life and see delay, struggle, or unpredictability, the unseen sees preservation, preparation, and mercy layered upon mercy. And one day, perhaps much later, you will fully understand how many disasters were diverted, how many losses were actually rescues, how many endings were safeguards, and how many unanswered prayers were acts of love. Because Allah's protection does not always feel gentle, but it is always precise, always intentional, and always aligned with your ultimate good. And the fact that you are still standing with faith intact is itself proof that Allah protected you in ways you never saw, and continues to do so even now. Chosen one, there is a moment in the journey of certain servants when their story quietly stops being only about their own pain and begins to serve a far greater divine purpose, because Allah does not allow some souls to endure what should have destroyed them merely so they can return to normal life. He allows them to endure so they can become ayat, living signs that testify to His mercy, His power, and His faithfulness to those who cling to Him, even when their hands are shaking. And your survival was never accidental, never random, and never meaningless, because you were brought to places where many hearts collapse completely, places of prolonged loss, unanswered dua, betrayal from trusted people, isolation that suffocates the soul, and pressure that rewrites identities. And yet you emerged, still praying, still believing, still trying to remain sincere, even when your faith felt fragile. And this is precisely what turned your life into a sign for others, because people do not need reminders from those who were never tested. They need proof from those who were almost broken, and yet remained standing by Allah's permission. And without realizing it, your endurance began to speak louder than any sermon, because people watched you lose things you loved and not curse Allah, watched you be wronged and not become unjust, watched you be delayed and not abandon prayer, watched you be isolated and still seek Allah in private. And this quiet consistency unsettled them, inspired them, and awakened something inside them, especially those who were secretly close to giving up, because Shaitan's greatest strategy is convincing people that hardship is proof of abandonment, yet your existence directly contradicted that lie, showing that hardship can be proof of selection, preparation, and purification. And some people who never listened to reminders began to reflect simply by observing your patience. Some who mocked faith began to soften when they saw how faith sustained you. And some who were drowning in despair found hope not because you had all the answers, but because you were still breathing spiritually after storms that should have extinguished you. And Allah used your wounds as wisdom, your scars as silent lessons, and your survival as reassurance that He does not forsake those who keep returning to Him, even if they return exhausted, confused, or ashamed. And this humbled you deeply because you know how close you came to collapse, how many nights you begged Allah just to help you survive another day, how many times you whispered dua with trembling certainty, unsure if relief would ever come, yet Allah kept you alive, kept your heart connected, kept your iman breathing, and kept your path unfolding one step at a time. And when people now look at you, they may see resilience, calm, or strength, but you know the truth that it was Allah who carried you when you had no strength left. And this awareness protects you from arrogance, because signs of Allah are never proud of themselves. They are humbled by the one who made them signs, and Shaitan despises this outcome more than anything, because he invested effort, time, whispers, and pressure into breaking you, yet Allah turned that very effort into guidance for others, making your survival a mirror that reflects divine mercy, exposing Shaitan's failure without you needing to announce victory. And even now, you may not fully understand who is watching you, who is drawing strength from your consistency, or who is quietly holding on because they saw you hold on. But the unseen knows, and the angels record it, and Allah rewards it, because He promised that whoever struggles for His sake, He will guide them to His paths. And your life became one of those paths for others, a reminder that pain does not cancel destiny, delay does not equal rejection, weakness does not disqualify sincerity, and falling does not mean you are forsaken if you keep returning. And one day, perhaps much later, you will fully realize how many hearts were steadied by your existence, how many doubts were softened by your perseverance, and how many people found the courage to stay with Allah because you stayed. And until that day, every breath you take, every prayer you whisper, and every step you walk with humility stands as silent testimony that survival with faith intact is itself a miracle, and Allah chose you to be one of its living signs. Chosen one, as this message comes to an end, understand this with certainty. Nothing you endured was wasted, nothing you survived was random, and nothing that tried to break you was ever stronger than the protection Allah placed over your soul. Every tear you cried in silence was recorded. Every prayer you whispered when your voice was shaking was heard, and every moment you held on to faith when letting go would have been easier, elevated you in ways you may not yet see. You were never abandoned, you were being refined, preserved, and prepared for a purpose greater than your pain. Walk forward now without fear, without shrinking yourself, and without doubting the journey Allah chose for you, because the same Lord who carried you through the darkest nights is the one who will honor your patience in the light. If this message reached your heart, let it be a reminder to stay firm, to trust deeply, and to never let hardship convince you that Allah is distant. Share this message with someone who is struggling to hold on, and subscribe to Wisdom of the Prophets, where we remind hearts that Allah never wastes suffering, Shaitan never has the final word, and faith, when held sincerely, always triumphs. All praise belongs to Allah, Lord of the worlds.